Welcome to day one of our video series for setting up a math intervention block. This is a three-part series and each day includes free, ready-to-print resources to help you get started with intervention in your classroom. I started my journey towards a better understanding of how intervention works 10 years ago. This particular school year, I had a student who was really struggling, and so our admin team decided that we needed to go through the intervention process with this student. I was given the directive of Mrs. Euro, you'll put this student through 6 weeks of Tier 2 intervention and come back at the end of that 6 weeks with data. That was it. I wasn't trained on the RTI process. I wasn't given any additional materials. I had to research and find my own materials and create a framework that made sense to me. I'm excited to share with you what I have learned along the way. It comes as no surprise that every classroom is composed of students with varying abilities. You have a group of students coming together to learn the same content, but not every child learns the same way and starts at the same level of understanding of previously taught concepts. Intervention serves the lower 25% of your classroom. Providing support for this group of students can be challenging for educators. The gaps can feel too wide, time is scarce, and you're being pulled in 20 different directions. But this group, more than any other, can achieve the largest gains in your classroom. Today we will examine the intervention process and what each tier looks like so you feel prepared to serve all your students. There are 3 tiers of instruction, and as you work your way up from tier to tier, the instruction will become more personalized to the student and their needs. Let's take a look at each tier. Tier 1 is the support you provide to all your students. This varies throughout the year and from skill to skill. Tier 1 is just really good teaching. It's knowing your students and when someone needs extra support. Sometimes this lesson is just a flop, and usually it is a small handful of your strong students that will alert you of this. When 2 to 3 students that aren't usually on your radar for help are struggling, you know you have some work to do. I am standards-based in my planning and executing of lessons, so I know exactly what skills I have covered in my classroom. But I also make certain to cover fluency with number talks and build problem-solving skills through rigorous tasks and word problems. All of my lessons share the goal of conceptual understanding. My math block includes all these components, so I know that I'm serving all the key areas of a strong math student. Tier 2. Whenever I visualize true intervention, I always see Tier 2 in my mind. You are really in the thick of providing a more personalized plan of support for a student. This can come in the form of small group instruction and/or one-to-one aid. I have found that being very systematic and structured in the setup of my intervention reteaching is beneficial for you and the student. It makes life easier to have a routine because there are a lot of moving parts to this process. In establishing a routine, consider your schedule. Aim for at least 2 to 3 times a week, 10 to 15 minutes a session. I have also done a schedule of 5 days a week. This was based on student need. If you do rotations during your math block and you group your students based on ability level, the time spent with you can count towards your Tier 2 instructional time. Regarding the skills that you cover, keep it simple and small. When I'm setting the goals for an intervention student, they are skills-based, and I also separate procedural and conceptual understanding. This way, I can target the 2 levels and have proof that I'm sufficiently supporting the skill and standard. Our math intervention resources include practice pages for procedural and conceptual understanding for each standard for grades K through 8. Finally, data. On Wednesday, we're going to cover data more in depth, but when establishing your schedule, plan for at least 4 to 6 points of data. Typically, you'll have a meeting where admin or support staff establishes that you are officially in Tier 2 of intervention with the student. They will plan to meet 5 to 6 weeks from the day of that meeting. When you all meet again, and these meetings typically involve parents, you want to have as much data as possible. I cannot stress this enough. I save everything and bring the documentation to all meetings. On Wednesday, we'll go over the data I include in my intervention folder. Lastly, we have Tier 3. I consider Tier 3 to be an extension of Tier 2. When we move into Tier 3, we need to continue support based on data. All that wonderful data that you collected from Tier 2 will help you plan accordingly for Tier 3. The intervention process can certainly have ebbs and flows. There have been times where I start to feel defeated when we move on to Tier 3, but stay positive. It's a long game, and with the proper materials, you can get to the finish line. Don't be afraid to ask admin or support staff for help. Ask questions when you have them and feel free to email me. Today's freebie includes 2 forms for you to use when you need to implement Tier 2 with a student. You may find that your school doesn't include forms for easy documentation, but you want to keep track of everything. These two forms come from our Math Intervention Printables bundles for grades K through 8. Each bundle includes additional graphs and forms for easy data tracking. You will find this freebie on the page that had the link for this video. See you tomorrow for day 2.